Hey, what's up, guys? So another SlingTalk episode with picture in picture. It's going to be coming up soon. There we go. This mission here is quite a simple mission. It's just flying big bags to different areas, and a few other stuff in big bags, but mainly big bags filled with gravel and stones and sand and dirt, basically. And I'll explain a little bit when we get airborne, but basically now the helicopter is faced downwind, and that's also the only approach path into the loading area that I can use due to there's animals around, cows, and there's houses on the opposite side, so I can't do the turn around and come into wind on the deliveries with the empty hooks, but I get to go out or leave the loading area with into headwind. And yeah, as you might have noticed, I got the new mounts from my colleague, so that's good to have back. I was kind of getting used to not having to fly with that thing on my face, but I think that might be, I named this rushed approaches, and it might be a little bit because I was a little bit unused to flying fast without the mount on the face, or the FPV mount. But I do think this is probably the best combination. Just two cameras, one FPV and then one facing downwards, or one on the line, so that you can get a better picture of what's happening. Because I know it's not easy to gauge sometimes how far off I am from the ground and stuff, just looking down through the sling window. Alright, so leaving now, we are going, this is pretty much turning into wind now. And then you can see there's a bunch of cows down on my right, so I'm gonna have to turn around those every time. They have gotten really used to helicopters. There's a few cows wandering around there too, out on the field. So I have to watch for that every time I go out. Yeah, flying here is quite a lot of cabins and summer houses and stuff, so you have to be careful of where you fly, and especially some of the roofs have I don't know if it's called thatched roofs, but like grass on the roofs, so it's really hard to see them sometimes. And we got 4 big bags going this direction. It's right behind this cabin here, where you can see on the you can see him on both screens now, that guy in the yellow jacket. Taking it nice and easy. He starts moving, so I figured he wanted it closer, but I think he might just be a little bit afraid of the load. It might be actually good to have one more camera looking at the controls, if there are controls on the left side. I mean, the more angles the better, I guess, but just editing this, it takes so long. And I have to render them, and then I have to make this voiceover, and then I have to render it again, because I don't know any other way. So if anybody has any Premiere Pro tips, please let me know, because this is taking like 2 days of just rendering, basically. Alright, so coming in here, I'm coming in downwind now, so that, yeah, a bit on the unsmooth side here. A bit on the unsmooth side on that approach. We gotta pay attention to the next one, because I think the first like 4 approaches maybe are kinda okay, but then I get rushed. I don't get rushed, I rush it rather on the next few. I can't remember which ones, we'll see. I mean, it's not going to be hard to notice which ones are rushed or not. That's the thing, when coming in downwind with an empty hook, it feels like that, because basically if you're judging your approach speed based on visual inputs, so basically what you're seeing outside, that last deceleration below ETL and then down to full stop is going to be quicker, if that makes sense. If you have headwind, you're going to maintain airspeed obviously all the way until you stop basically, so it's going to feel a lot smoother. But you're going to, unless you are really dialed in, I guess, you're gonna reach zero relative airspeed before you reach the target, and before, even though the load is still moving or the hook is still moving, if that makes sense. Really nice day. I think the wind today up, like down on ground at the delivery area, I think it was around maybe like five knots. But up in the air, I think, yeah, it wasn't much. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't much. But it's still enough to, if you see just pay attention to the airspeed gauge there next to the 2 big screens, the lower clock there, or the one in the middle rather. That's 40 knots, and now it's back all the way down to 0. So I'm already down below ETL, I think. I don't have sound on, so I can't hear it. Yeah, so basically, you can see there, it's just like a much quicker quick stop compared to what it would have been if you were upwind. Using the torque turn here. I think that's you can see the weight pretty clearly. It's right over 700 kilos, or between 700 and 800 kilos on these first bags here, and then they're going to get a little bit heavier as we go on. I've tried to put the picture-in-picture on the same angle as the helicopter, but not quite successful. mouse. So there it just stands still, so that it's quite easy to know where he wants it. But the previous ones he moved around, and I think he moves around quite a lot on the second or the last one too. Anyways, let's look at this approach, and then also, I know I did it in episode like way not way in the past, but like a year ago maybe, about torque turns or using the torque on the helicopter when you lift to turn yourself into wind. So basically, when I increase the power, the helicopter wants to turn to the left. And it's basically just a little bit of a time-saving maneuver, because here I'm downwind, and not very accurate, but acceptable. So now I just lift it, I put tension on the lines, and now I can just torque it around. I'm not using right pedal, and then go for airspeed, and then I'd use torque just a little bit, decrease the collective to stop the rotation towards the left, and then once you have a little bit more efficiency on the vertical fin, you can increase the power again. It's really helpful, but I was quite slow to pick it up anyways, so I might as well have just turned the floor, I think. And obviously, if you have the wind from the back left, you have to be careful, because you're going to have to use more right pedal to more right pedal to turn it, or to keep it from turning in the wind. It was very light winds today, but yeah. But if that makes sense, if you're stood with a left crosswind, the helicopter wants to turn towards, the nose wants to go left. If that makes sense, because the wind wants to push the tail, and that makes the helicopter turn to the left. So if you increase the power, then you're going to have to use even more right pedal to keep it from turning left. You can kind of get away with it if you do like I do here. You pick it up, and then as you start rotating, you start moving into wind straight away. But if in strong winds, it's better to usually just stand nose into wind, just to, you don't want any of the loss of tail rotor efficiencies. That was a good delivery. Looked kind of lucky, but I'll take it. That would actually have been good to have the cameras on the controls to see what I was talking about there. It's kind of hard to explain over with just sound. Alright, so I'm done with that first place. Now I'm going out to, excuse me, the second depot, or the second point of delivery. It's a little bit further. Probably about twice as long per lap. The load is hanging nicely. And you can see my where I'm flying. There's no houses and stuff on this part of the island, or this part of the coastline here. Beautiful spot. Gets a little playful there. And I get a little playful with the angles, or bored. One of the two. Alright, so my first approach here is going to be right to the right of that big shining white house there. So I'm going beyond that. That's going to be like where I go in between. So I have to aim between the houses here. And I'm coming in quite steep. So this approach here is not too good. And I'm like in a bad habit mode right here, like going down really fast now with a lot of forward speed, and then I break it, but just like bad control. This is just rushed. It's easily avoidable by just doing it, taking 3 seconds longer. That would have been quite good. It's still acceptable, I think. It's just very easy to make it a lot better and a lot more controlled by just taking a few seconds extra. I talked about that in the last episode about flying loads at the correct angle of approach. Angle of approach, is that a new word? But basically, when you're flying light stuff, you can do it faster, but it's usually always smart to always do it at a good angle, so that you don't develop bad habits flying stuff at very steep angles. Because if you fly heavy stuff, like if you're flying 30 big bags of just like 500 kilos, and then you got one load of 1200 kilos in the end, it's easy if you're tired to just like be an autopilot and just fly the heavy loads as well at a steep angle. So I like, for me personally, I think it's better to just always fly it at a like more correct, if you will, angle. This is also fast and rushed, so control. Helicopters all over the place. This is just bad. Losing the power. Going quiet. Yeah, I don't know why I showed that. It might be that I went a little high before I went for speed. Didn't really look at the weight or the load indicator either, but I think it might be. It might have been like 700 kilos. Can't really see it. Just for information, I'm watching this without audio when I record this, and I also have a very low res version, so I'm sorry if it's like overlapping with things I'm saying on the radio and stuff. Tiny little boat there. Alright, so that was, now we got another place that we're going to deliver to. The wind is coming from the back left now, so I'm going to do a left turn and then do a right side slip in towards the landing area. There's a dock sticking out straight ahead with a red house. That's the delivery beyond those power lines. Those are low volt power lines, so that you don't have any restrictions to how close you can go to them, because the cables are isolated, even though, I mean, you don't want to get too close. I'm quite high above the power lines here, I think. About there's level. And then we're going for these white marks. And then be careful of the helicopter positions. Yeah, I moved a little bit over to the right there, or to the helicopter's right, just to make sure that I don't accidentally bump into the power lines when lifting back up. There's two big flashing screens. On the right one, the bottom left, the bottom left square shows the wind velocity, but I cannot see it. That's a cool little instrument, but not very. I mean, it's useful, I guess, in some cases, but it's usually pretty obvious where the wind is coming from if it's strong enough. Alright, so let's see what about this approach. Yeah, all over the place, over-controlling, and bad brake. Little head shake there. Didn't like that one. Looking at it now, it doesn't look that bad, but it's I've said this so many times, but I get the most annoyed I get is when I know what I'm trying to do and I know how it should look and I can't for some reason do it. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I just don't do it. It's not that I can't do it, I just don't do it. So another one coming in here. So we're going a little bit closer to the house, I think, this time. Talking on the radio, I see, so I'm super high. Approach gets a little botched. Going for that white mark there. Was happy with that. whenever the, at least for me, whenever, like, if you have to talk on approaches, especially if you get asked a question where you have to use, well, basically brain capacity, the first thing that goes is the angle of the approach for me. So if I get asked, like, how much fuel do you have left, or how many more bags can you do, and I have to look at the fuel gauge and try to figure out how many rounds I got left before I have to refuel, the approach is going to be shit, almost guaranteed, unless I actively try to fly the aircraft before thinking, like trying to use more energy on flying the aircraft. That happens almost every time. Just for now, I got the wind coming in from the right here now, and then I'm turning downwind on the approach. I'm going to start moving out over these trees down to the right now, a little bit more. Yeah, and that gives me a little bit better approach, I think. And I think this might be the one that has no. That approach looked all right. It's just that it's so I'm over controlling a lot. And the difference, like 5 seconds makes, is, in my opinion, enormous. Like if I were to slow down and just use 5 more seconds on the approach, it gets so much smoother. And I've always said that, like, speed should be the byproduct of, like, learning how to do things correctly and thoroughly and according to the correct procedure. So speed is not something that you should train for, like specifically train for speed. You shouldn't train to do it faster, you should train to do it correctly. And then as you learn how to do it correctly, you're just going to get more and more efficient at it. Because as soon as you start taking shortcuts, you're just going to screw it up at some point. It might be okay for a few approaches, but generally, if you take shortcuts and just try to do things fast because you feel pressured or something, it's just going to make it worse. And a lot of times it's just going to make you even slower. A little bit feisty in that turn. A little bit sporty turn, but let's see. Yeah. A little high here. Yeah, I think the camera's out, or the 360 camera's out for now. So it's going to be, I think, one more approach without the 360 angle, or the picture-in-picture. It's an alright approach. Here it comes back in again. I just love this angle. Crazy good. This is good, and I haven't talked about that yet, but this is good cyclic movement on the approach, just like as little as overly, like humanly possible. And then, now it's getting a little, I can't see it. But, okay. Yeah, I didn't talk about. I talked about that, or I have talked about it so much. Oops. I've talked about it so much in previous episodes, but keeping the cyclics as steady as possible is very important, and it's going to be very beneficial later when you start flying more advanced stuff that require you to keep it still. Like flying big backs and stuff like this, you can move it around as much as you want, but you're not going to be doing yourself any favors when later you're going to have to do more advanced stuff, and then you're going to have those bad habits of moving the cyclic because it hasn't had an impact yet on your flying. But as you get up in the flying more advanced stuff, and it gets tighter and tighter, and then even when you start to have people up in the tower to receive stuff in the tower, it's going to be super important to keep or to have that good habit of keeping the cyclic as still as possible. And it's also a good exercise in learning how to control the helicopter. Because if you thinking consciously, being very conscious, or being very aware, I don't know that word, being very aware of what you're doing with the helicopter, with the controls, is, I think, very important. It's like a fucking astronaut on this approach, super high. Super high. Going, yeah, see the white mark there. Yeah, as I was saying, keeping the controls and knowing exactly what the controls will do to the helicopter is very important. Because I think that's something that you might not necessarily forget, but it becomes such like automatic actions that you don't really think about it anymore. And that is good in a sense, but sometimes it's, especially when you're trying to figure out why you can't do something well, or if you know how something should be done, or you can't perform well. I think that's the only way to improve it is to consciously think of it, or be super aware of how you are controlling the helicopter. And then knowing how you should be controlling the helicopter, and then taking steps to improve it. Unless you have an instructor to tell you how to do that, it's very hard to notice, like flaws in your own piloting, I find, at least. Shit, oh my god, it's so bad. But here, keep the helicopter steady. That was like a combination of good and bad, so a rushed approach. But then I knew I just have to keep the position of this of the load on the sight window, like align that sight picture, and eventually the hook is going to come to the load master. So that was kind of good and bad. There, especially when you're new, it's very easy to start chasing the hook and focusing way too much on what the long line is doing. And I think there's way too much focus on that when learning how to fly sling. Like, obviously you have to notice what the hook is doing and you have to act accordingly, but you shouldn't be learning it that way, because the hook is going to follow the helicopter. You can't control the hook, you can only control the helicopter. So you should learn how to fly the helicopter so the hook acts the way you want it to. You shouldn't fly and then see what the hook is doing and then act accordingly to what the hook is doing. I think that would be kind of a backwards way of doing it and a slow way of improving your flying skills. So altitude control and stuff like that, and approach angles and stuff, you should think about it or be very aware of what you're doing when learning how to fly sling, or like especially when learning how to fly sling, so that you can improve and do it more like it's more of a systematic approach, basically, like finding something what is wrong with what you're doing, like looking at what you're doing and then correcting it by looking at it very objectively and I'm getting distracted here by that camera angle. Jesus. Yeah, well, it's not the most important thing. But yeah, basically I think you know what I'm saying is that you should try to be very critical of what you're doing yourself, and think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then think about how you think it could be improved upon, and then take steps towards that. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Nice and smooth on the controls here. So far, so good. Drop these off on the big bags here and then move on. Loadmaster. This one by the yellow ones, the yellow bags. See the shadow there. Stopping way short. Jesus. thinking was here. Oh, that was that like a sticker or something on the bag that flew off? It's also this that red thing on the bag is not. It's not like one of the ears. It's just red indication, or like red is going to the red on the map. So that we don't put the wrong pumps or the wrong bags or whatever the stuff is on the wrong position. I think I might just have forgot. Oh, there we go. So following this patch here of no houses and no cabins. Oh yeah, this is going into towards the power lines. Normally flying stuff close to power lines, you have a 30-meter rule, but if you have I don't know how to say that, but a leader of safety is the direct translation. You can put it down to like 12.5 meters outside of the high power or high voltage power lines. So I don't know how far that is, but it's at least 1.5 meters. I think that's a better approach than most of the other ones. It's oh yeah, there's a hole. You can see it on the shadow there. So luckily here, the loadmaster noticed it, and I could see it because of the shadow when I looked down the second time, but I was more focused on the power, and if I had just continued flying it like that, I would probably not have noticed it, the hole in the bag. And obviously that can become quite dangerous. It was a very small hole, so but like turning like this, you get G-forces, and you obviously increase the forces on that little rift or that little hole, so that you might like make it really big really quickly, and then you lose a lot of weight really quickly, and that is very bad when you're flying with a big bag. because that thing just acts like a pilot chute, basically, like on a parachute. It will pull the long line up towards the tail rotor. I've never had it happen to me, but it has happened to people. Now we're going out towards the last place. I think it's the last delivery place out today. No, there's one more actually. But this is probably the furthest that we're going. Right now I'm just looking for the guys. Yeah, because there's one more big bag, the yellow big bag that's going out to the guys. They're in the middle of the hood down there. A little bit hard on the set down. Oh yeah, I did put the camera up on this one, but as you saw, it was shaking like crazy. So even the Hero 10, it was too shaky for. Alright, let's look at this next approach here. What's good about this, like flying a lot of rounds, is you can, like here, I would use a point on the altimeter and an airspeed, so that you always have the same starting point, and then you have different points that you fly over, so you have the same route. And then you have different checks along that point, or along that route, with different altitudes and stuff, so that you can adjust it. Fast on this one, and yes, I was lucky. I was just lucky. I think the main reason I'm doing the approaches quite bad here, or not quite bad, but they're a little bit more, they're not as accurate as I would like them to be. And I'm also coming in a little bit shallow. Usually, this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but if I'm flying downwind, I want to come in very steep, or not very steep, but a lot steeper, because it's just easier to control the position of the hook in my sling window when you have a little bit of descent rate going. Obviously you have to manage it with regards to DRS and settling with power and stuff, but it's very rarely that it becomes a problem with an empty hook, if you know what you're doing. Steady on the cyclic. Well, it's I do that a lot. I do that, like, not usually, but on this particular mission, just like setting it down and then moving it that last meter just to get it nice and tidy. There also, it's doing what I'm like. I don't practice what I preach. I should be doing it like correctly the first time, and then basically improving my skills that way, instead of trying to do it quickly and having to readjust it afterwards. Because like down the line, it's not gonna do me any good to try to do it fast this time. Actually today we were quite low on fuel. We figured out, because there was a few extra bags that we didn't account for. So maybe today it was an exception, but usually if you try to rush things, it's not gonna pay out, or pay off rather. I think I got a little bit more altitude here. Bit maybe. See the shadow there on the hook, that's pretty nice. Stop it. Yeah, see, that's a good approach. And I don't see any reason why, like, all of my previous approaches weren't like that, you know? Well, I know the reason. The reason was that they were rushed. But that is what they should look like. And also, that might be different schools of thought on this, but I don't see any reason why you should try to do it any faster. Especially, well, not especially, but for me, if I try to do it faster, like if you have a good speed of doing it, that's okay. And then obviously you're going to get better. But if I try to do it faster than that, at least half the time I'm not going to be as accurate. And that, I think, that's not going to be good for the long run. It's not going to help me develop speed in the long run. Keeping it at a good pace with very accurate and very controlled, with control inputs, and like being aware of the control inputs, being aware of what you're doing. That's the right way to go, in my opinion. And then setting up these approaches, setting them up at different, like here for example, I would have an altitude where I come over the lake around here. I would have a set altitude, and then a set airspeed, and then as I turn to the right here, I would have an altitude about halfway through the turn. So coming up to around here, glance in at the altitude, and then adjust my airspeed, and then here, look at the altitude. And then from here it's pretty visual. So do it again, put it down, and then cheat. And in that particular case, I don't know if there's too much to be gained from doing it super tight on the first one. But yeah, like having on that, that right turn that on the approach is a pretty good example of, or like what I said, like those checkpoints is usually the checkpoints that I have for the turn. And then by doing that, like you don't need to do that. You can easily fly sling load without having to look at your instruments. But the more you do that, the more you're going to develop a good sense of how high you are and how fast you're going, and how much time you have to decelerate before hitting your target. So I don't think that's a bad idea at all to use instruments as much as possible with sling loading, even though after you get used to it, it's going to be mostly by feel. But at least when starting out, you should have references, points of references to when to start things, like start the approach, when to start to slow down, and then when to look outside, and when to do everything basically. Let's just look at this approach here. Nice and smooth, super steady on the collective. Oh, cyclic rather. Oh, he's over there. Shit, didn't see him. Alright, so that wasn't too good, but still not too bad. I'd still say that's acceptable. But yeah, just having checkpoints to check along the approach is gonna help you so much in the beginning, at least. And those are some things that I wish I was told in the beginning, like when I learned to fly sling load, it was a lot, and I feel that's like the case with a lot of people. It's just, unless you're very lucky and have a good instructor, you have to figure out so much of it on your own. And like people, they have so much, like experienced pilots, they have so much knowledge that they're just sitting on and not sharing, basically. Not because they don't want to, but just because people don't ask. And there's not a really, in my opinion, not a really well-developed system of sharing that knowledge. Which is one of the reasons I starting to do these SlingTalk episodes. Not because I'm the best pilot in the world, because I know that I'm not, but I know I have some knowledge that could be shared by, or that can be beneficial to some people. And I think there should be more of it, basically. And it's weird because it's like one of the hardest things to do in a helicopter as well as sling loading. Also, like, yeah, I'm going for a different spot here. I think this approach was pretty bad. Super. See, now I'm going fast again. Got the wind straight from my right. I have to go in this way though. So I'm super fast and high, and I don't control the helicopter well here, so I do a little quick stop there. Again, Jesus Christ. Just rushed, basically. Yeah, so I think that was the last of the picture-in-picture for this video. But what I wanted to say was, like, when you learn to fly helicopters, and I've said this in previous videos as well, is that you have so many set. Oh, that's some 360 footage. Guess I was wrong again. But you have so many, like, criteria, or not criteria, but so many. Like when you're flying approaches, you learn how to do like a pattern. Like the takeoff is so you push forward cyclic with a little bit of power, and then you wait until you get ETL, and then you climb at like 60 knots at 500 feet, until you reach a certain altitude. Then you turn left on the crosswind, and then you should be at a certain altitude when you turn left again for the downwind, and then you should climb to whatever for your downwind. And everything is so structured. And even though sling load is a lot more dynamic and there's many more factors to consider than a normal pattern when you're learning how to fly a helicopter, it's still the same. It should still be the same procedure or the same approach to learning it, I feel. But it's just not, because you've already learned how to fly a helicopter, so now you should basically know how to do this as well. I feel. It's not the case every time, of course, but I feel like there's a lot of that. Same goes for like pickups and stuff. It's way easier if you have this point in the window, or in the sling window rather, where you know it's straight down, so that you can position your helicopter above it before you start applying power. That is also something that's hard kind of in the beginning, or at least I find it hard, or found it hard, is to know where straight down is, because you don't really have any it's really hard to have a reference point, even now when I know where it's kind of supposed to be, like different wind settings, and if it's really turbulent and stuff, that point is going to move around a lot on the sling window. But just having like practiced in low wind conditions, it's going to be way easier to get a feel for. You're going to develop that feel for where straight down is, so that you can pick it up correctly on the first go. Because not every, I think it was like 2 episodes ago where I flew out those what do you call it, poles between the power lines. So that was those are the first lifts of the day. So you don't have that luxury of lifting something and seeing where it hangs to know where straight down is. So basically, you have to have a pretty good idea even before you start lifting it. And obviously, that is something that's only going to come with practice. But it's also therefore why it's so important to develop these good habits, or good habits, and having good references, so that you can have something to adjust according to. Because if you just like a little shake of the head there, not too happy about that, but it was fine. What was I saying? Because if you don't really know what's wrong, as I was saying earlier, it's really hard to adjust anything. But if you know that each time you lift something, it doesn't go straight up, it swings around a lot. Like every time you lift up, the load moves forward in your sling window. That means, without a doubt almost, that you're too far forward when you're lifting. So your straight down point is too far back in the sling window, if that makes sense. So then maybe on the next approach, or the next time you lift, you should have that straight down point, or where you think the straight down point is, that should be a little bit further forward. And then you can adjust from there and see if, it's still not enough, then even a little bit more forward. And then if you go too much, you can go a little bit back. And if you don't have anything to adjust by, it's just going to be, it just keeps flying all over the place every time I try to lift up. Let's do this approach here, nice and steady on the cyclic. Hook is pretty steady in the sling window. And brake too early. It's pretty, came in a little high there, I think. But it's a little inaccurate, but it's okay. I broke too early. Especially that is also gonna, especially flying like big backs and stuff, is gonna increase your efficiency a lot if you know what straight down is, because you can lift it up quicker without having to drag it. Because if you lift it and you notice that you're off center, you're gonna drag it a little bit, and then you have to lower it down again and then readjust and then pick it up. And if you're getting into flying concrete and stuff, you're going to be really close to the car a lot of the time, and or the concrete car, for those of you who don't know, like concrete comes in these trucks with big tanks on them, and you fill the concrete tubs that you fly, and you have them really close to the back of the truck each time. So you have to be careful that you don't go too far forward, because if you lift it, then you might go into, like, drag the load into the concrete truck, and that's just going to be not good. And that's a more advanced operation, but also very standardized. Like, it's almost the same approach every time, so it's easy to become proficient at it once you know, like, what parameters to look for, like how fast you're going, what the center you have on the approach, and where your point is on the window when you're picking up. And another thing that a lot of people do, including myself, is I have my thumb. I don't know if you've noticed that on the few videos I have that where you can see my thumb. Almost. Jesus. I don't know what I did there. That was annoying to look at. But I have my thumb on my seat on the collective. You see it there, actually. And that allows me to know where my collective is. So I know what it's going to feel like for any given day. After a few loads, I'm going to know what it feels like to pull maybe like 9.3 on the FLI. I know what that's going to feel like in the hand. At a certain fuel, of course. That's also keeps you from, like, pulling too much and over torquing and stuff. And there used to be thumb rests on the seats. I don't know. Yeah, they were probably just put in there by the mechanics. I don't think that's something that comes from the factory, but I love that. There used to be an actual thumb rest right next to the collective. But now I have to use the seat. And obviously you're going to develop a feel for, like, just pulling the collective. But I feel like if you have the seat in addition, it's just one more point of reference. Alright, I think... yeah, we're going for more bags here. Let's see this approach then. A little bit jerky. Yeah, jerking it on the cyclic. Stopping early. Yeah. Finding my center. Yeah, a little bit to the right there. And of course it's gonna be like on different days, like you're gonna get tired and you're gonna get fatigued, and it's gonna be very tempting basically to just do it quickly. But that's when all the good training comes in, because if you have good habits, you're just gonna do it. You're just gonna do it better, basically, without even trying. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's just like to do it more slowly and do it correctly and do it as good as possible, especially when you have the time to do it, or you always have the time. You should always have the time anyways, but it's not the case. And then you're gonna gain so much more in the long run from doing it correctly over and over again than trying to do it fast to begin with. I guess that's the moral of this episode. This is going to be the last delivery, so I hope this is going to be good. Come on, get in there. Get in that corner. Come on. Come on. Come on, man. That's acceptable. I think if I'm going to do another camera angle, it's going to be from just to the, like in between the seats facing forward, so that you can see both controls and the instrument panel better. But I might, we'll see how that works out. If you guys have any other angles or ideas, please let me know. It's going to be the last approach, or the last empty hook approach. See there, it'd be super interesting to have the control or the camera just looking at the controls, like I did that one time, but it died out. The camera died out, because here you're not going to see. You're going to see it here, and then once I move over to look down, you're not going to see the cyclic anymore. I'll get it. You stopped short. God damn. Alright, now that's gonna be good enough. So, hope you guys enjoyed. And, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.